She cheated, she lied, she walked away, and somehow she's the one crying. That's the strange reality of modern love. We live in an age where accountability feels like cruelty, and self-deception has become emotional survival. The modern woman can betray you and still see herself as the one who was betrayed. Because when she breaks something, she doesn't call it destruction. She calls it healing. When she walks away from loyalty, she doesn't call it abandonment. She calls it self-discovery. And when she cheats, she doesn't say, "I failed." She says, "I finally did something for myself." That's not awareness. That's rebranding guilt as growth. See, in her mind, she's not the villain. She's the victim of circumstance. A misunderstood woman forced to reclaim her happiness after years of feeling unseen, unheard, unfulfilled. Her story isn't about betrayal. It's about liberation. That's the power of modern conditioning. It teaches people that emotion justifies action. That if you felt something strongly enough, it must be valid, no matter the cost. So when she cheats, she doesn't see disloyalty. She sees awakening. She'll say things like, "Stop making me feel special. We just grew apart. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did." Every phrase designed not to lie, but to lessen. Because in her mind, she's not rewriting the truth. She's protecting herself from it. And that's the terrifying part. She genuinely believes it. Because the modern victim complex isn't about manipulation. It's about emotional survival. When people can't face their reflection, they break the mirror. And in the wreckage, they find a story where they're never the cause, only the consequence. She'll talk about how unhappy she was, how disconnected things had become, how the new man made her feel alive again. But what she's really saying is, "I needed someone else to distract me from the guilt of being me." And when he doesn't explode, when he doesn't fight or scream, when the man she betrayed simply goes silent, that's when her illusion begins to collapse. Because her story requires a villain, and a calm man doesn't fit the script. So she tells herself new lies to keep the guilt at bay. He never really loved me. He was controlling. He pushed me away. Every story, every justification, another layer of armor against accountability. That's the psychology of the modern victim. She doesn't destroy out of malice. She destroys out of denial. And when the dust settles, she'll be left wondering why she feels nothing, while convincing herself she finally found freedom. But freedom built on blame isn't peace. It's punishment that just takes longer to arrive. Cheating doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts in the mind, with a single thought that whispers, "I deserve more." That's where the rewrite begins. Before the act ever happens, she has to rewrite the story in her head, because even the most modern woman still knows, deep down, that betrayal violates her own moral code. So she changes the narrative. She tells herself she's unhappy, that he's distant, inattentive, emotionally unavailable. She magnifies every flaw, rewrites every moment, until the man who once adored her now feels like a stranger she's forced to endure. Because guilt is too heavy to carry, and to cheat with peace, she has to turn guilt into justification. That's how it happens. The slow emotional erosion that allows her to betray and still sleep at night. The betrayal becomes a reaction, not a decision. Her actions become self-defense, not destruction. He never really understood me. He stopped making me feel desired. He was always working. Each phrase a bandage over the wound she created herself. In her story, she's not abandoning love. She's escaping neglect, not betraying trust, but saving herself. And when that rewrite is complete, she's no longer the one at fault. He is. The man she betrayed becomes the reason she had to do it. That's the cruel irony. The more loyal and steady he was, the easier it becomes to frame him as the problem. Because loyalty doesn't feel like love when you're addicted to excitement. And safety feels suffocating to someone chasing stimulation. So when he doesn't argue, doesn't react, doesn't spiral, she confuses his peace for distance. She tells herself he's emotionally unavailable, as if stability is a flaw. That's how the rewrite deepens, until the act of betrayal no longer feels wrong, but necessary. Modern culture helps her finish the story. Online spaces filled with phrases like, "You deserve to be happy. Don't settle. If he's not meeting your emotional needs, you have a right to explore." Validation disguised as therapy. Empowerment laced with avoidance. And she takes it all in. Because the modern world no longer teaches people to manage guilt. It teaches them to rebrand it. So she calls her betrayal growth. She calls her lies boundaries. And the man who once gave her peace becomes the placeholder for all the emotions she refuses to face. That's the tragedy of the rewrite. It's not that she doesn't know what she did. It's that she can't afford to admit it. Because if she did, she'd have to face the truth. That she didn't cheat because she was unloved. She cheated because she was unfulfilled. And fulfillment was never his job to give. When the truth finally catches up to her, it doesn't appear as judgment. It appears as reflection. The mirror moment, when he looks at her with calm disappointment instead of rage. When he doesn't scream, doesn't plead, doesn't chase. He simply sees her. And that's when the panic begins. Because the worst punishment for betrayal isn't revenge. It's clarity. And his calmness, his stillness, his refusal to collapse forces her to face the one thing she's been running from. Herself. But here's the problem. Accountability feels like attack to the unhealed. When someone is addicted to self-justification, even silence sounds like accusation, so she fights it. Not with truth, but with distortion. She'll say things like, "You made me feel like I wasn't enough. You pushed me away. I wouldn't have done this if you had just..." Notice the pattern. Every sentence begins with you. Because accepting, I would mean taking responsibility, and responsibility would mean guilt. She can't afford that. So she turns reflection into rejection. She projects what she sees onto the man holding the mirror. His pain becomes her proof. His calmness becomes her evidence. His distance becomes her excuse. She'll tell her friends, "He didn't even fight for me. He acted like he didn't care." Because the truth, that he cared so much it broke him, doesn't fit the story she needs to believe. That's how shame transforms into self-defense. The same woman who caused the wound now calls herself the wounded. The same woman who ended the relationship claims it was already over. It's not manipulation, it's preservation. Her ego can't survive the weight of guilt, so it rebrands itself as a victim. And the moment she convinces herself she was driven to it, she's free. Not from consequence, but from conscience. That's why she can post quotes about healing, while the man she betrayed sits in silence. Why she can cry to her friends about how emotionally unavailable he was while ignoring that she was emotionally unfaithful. Because in her mind, his pain is the evidence she needs to feel righteous. But the mirror never lies. It just waits. And no matter how many excuses she crafts, the reflection always returns. When the adrenaline fades, when the new man doesn't fix the emptiness, when the freedom starts to feel like isolation, she'll see it again. The truth staring back at her. Not in anger, not in shame, just in silence. And that silence will hurt more than any confrontation ever could. Because it won't accuse her. It'll remind her that the person she betrayed the most was the one who loved her enough to stay calm when she expected war. She doesn't have to look far to feel justified. The world will hand her an alibi before she even asks for one. Because we now live in a culture that rewards rebellion and disguises selfishness as self-love. Movies call it empowerment. Influencers call it growth. Therapists call it finding yourself, and society calls it bravery. But what it really is avoidance. Avoidance of guilt, avoidance of introspection, avoidance of the uncomfortable truth that not every feeling deserves to be followed. When a man betrays, he's shamed. When a woman betrays, she's reclaiming her happiness. Every podcast, every post, every comment section is waiting to comfort her with words that make accountability optional. You were unfulfilled. You owed it to yourself to explore. You can't pour from an empty cup. The language sounds therapeutic, but it's poison dressed as progress. Because healing doesn't come from erasing consequence. It comes from facing it. And yet she scrolls through validation disguised as wisdom. She finds echo chambers that reassure her that loyalty is outdated, that monogamy is oppression, that a woman should never apologize for choosing herself. What they don't tell her is that sometimes choosing yourself means abandoning the person who actually chose you. That's the modern trap, a culture that teaches freedom without responsibility and love without sacrifice. So, when she cheats, she doesn't feel like she's breaking something sacred. She feels like she's breaking free. Because the world has already written her script. It's not betrayal. It's a breakthrough, not infidelity. Feminine energy seeking alignment. Every headline, every viral quote reinforces it. Don't settle for less. Follow your heart. Protect your peace. But here's the part they leave out. Peace doesn't come from chaos. And hearts that chase every impulse never find stillness. The culture that tells her to leave will vanish the moment she does. Because empowerment movements don't stay for the aftermath. The silence after the decision, the loneliness after the freedom. The nights when she realizes no one is clapping anymore. That's when the noise fades and reality replaces rhetoric. No more affirmations, no more applause. Just the truth that she traded something real for something performative. But by then the damage is done. The man she blamed has moved on. The people who encouraged her are nowhere to be found. And the only voice left is her own. The one she spent years trying to drown out with validation. That's the culture of excuses. Loud when you fall. Silent when you break. It celebrates your decisions, but never helps you live with them. Every story needs a villain. And when she cheats, she expects one. She expects shouting, accusations, a display of emotion that will prove her point, that he was cold, controlling, distant, that she was driven to do what she did. But what happens when the man she betrayed refuses to play that role? When he doesn't yell, when he doesn't break down, when he doesn't even ask why, just silence, stillness, a calm that she can't interpret and can't control. That's when her story begins to fall apart. Because her justification depends on his reaction. She needs his outrage to validate her version. She needs him to become the monster she can point to and say, "See? This is why I did it." But the calm man denies her that. He doesn't fight for explanation. He doesn't beg for closure. He doesn't try to make sense of what was never logical. He just walks away. Not out of pride, but out of peace. And that peace drives her mad. Because his silence isn't weakness. It's exposure. Without chaos, her narrative has nowhere to hide. Without anger, her guilt has nowhere to run. She tells her friends, he didn't even care. He just left. He was emotionless. But what she's really saying is, he didn't play his part. In her mind, his detachment becomes proof that she was right all along, that he was always distant, always unavailable. But deep down she knows. The calm isn't indifference. It's control. The kind of control that can't be manipulated. Because a man who can stay centered in betrayal has already made peace with pain. He doesn't need revenge. He doesn't need validation. He doesn't need to prove his worth to the one who couldn't see it. And that terrifies her. Because it's not the loss of him that haunts her. It's the loss of control over him. She can't fix it with tears. Can't provoke him with guilt. Can't draw him back with nostalgia. The silence becomes unbearable. Not because it's empty, but because it's honest. And that honesty reflects everything she tried to escape. It shows her that the problem was never him, never his tone, never his flaws, but her inability to sit with stillness. Because stillness reveals truth, and truth exposes who we really are when there's no one left to blame. So when he finally walks away, it doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like a mirror closing. And for the first time, she sees herself clearly. Not as the victim, but as the villain of her own story. Every story built on lies eventually caves in. Not with drama, not with shouting, but with silence. Because silence has a way of aging the truth. At first, it feels peaceful. Then it starts to echo. And in that echo, she begins to hear herself. The excuses she repeated so confidently. He didn't make me feel loved. We just grew apart. I had to do what was right for me. They don't sound noble anymore. They sound hollow, rehearsed. At first, she tries to ignore it. She tells herself it's just guilt. But guilt is what happens when a person knows they've done wrong. What she's feeling is deeper. It's dissonance. A psychological split between who she pretends to be and who she knows she's become. The world moves on. The validation fades. The new man, the one who made her feel alive, starts to look ordinary. He doesn't trigger adrenaline anymore. He triggers memory. And that's when it hits her. She didn't leave because she wanted freedom. She left because she couldn't sit with contentment. She confused peace for boredom, and now that chaos is gone, she realizes she was never chasing happiness. She was running from herself. That's the collapse. The slow, silent unraveling of a narrative built to protect ego. The more she tries to rebuild it, the less convincing it becomes. The people who once said, "You did the right thing," now look at her differently. The friends who once said, "You deserve better," now whisper behind her back. And the man she betrayed, the one she painted as heartless, is nowhere to be found. He didn't break. He didn't wait. He evolved. And that, more than anything, destroys the illusion that she was the victim. Because you can't be the victim of a man who never retaliated. You can't claim oppression from someone who chose peace. You can't rewrite history when the person you blame never opened his mouth to defend himself. The truth stands quietly, but it stands forever. So she scrolls through his page, pretending not to care, but wondering how he looks lighter, how he looks free, how the man she outgrew somehow became everything she pretended to want. And that realization doesn't spark regret. It sparks clarity. The kind that doesn't come from apology, but from consequence. Because guilt fades when you lie to others, but it lingers when you lie to yourself. That's the collapse. The end of the story she told to survive the truth. And as the silence grows louder, she finally sees what everyone else already knew. She wasn't escaping him. She was escaping accountability.